and I'm John Luciew. And once again, we're back live on YouTube. So get your questions for Nick in the comments, and we'll get to as many as we can. Nick, you're coming back fresh and rested from vacation down in Key West, I hear. So, and you got back just in time for all that seismic activity in the Steel City that broke yesterday with that morning 412 area code earthquake that came in two distinct waves. I mean, the first one was like positive. The Jalen Ramsey is coming to Pittsburgh was the first thing that broke. Then the crash in terms of, for a lot of fans of the Steelers, seeing Minkah Fitzpatrick, who the Steelers acquired in a trade with the Dolphins for a first-round pick, is going back from whence he came to those same Dolphins as part of this trade, which also brings tight end Jonnu Smith into Pittsburgh and into an increasingly crowded tight end room. So, Nick, I just want you to sort of recap just your initial reactions, the gut level instincts that you saw here, and how maybe your evaluation of everything that went down has evolved over the past 24 plus hours that you've been digesting this. Let's, kind of recap everything that you kind of went through in covering this yesterday.
Yeah, not surprised they ended up trading for Jalen Ramsey. That was a rumor for a while. Jonnu Smith was too, John. I believe we talked about that a few times, Jonnu Smith potentially being a trade. So the actual players the Steelers acquired, not surprising. Trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, legitimately surprising to me. Did not expect them to trade a superstar like that back in a deal like this. I mean, listen, you could have probably traded 2 draft picks, and that would have been fine, right? You probably could have traded a 4th, your 5th, and then you could have gotten that 7th back, and I think you would have been okay. But this Jalen Ramsey market, I think, was hotter than people probably thought it was. The Rams wanted him, and that was something that I think the Steelers took into consideration. They had to outbid the Rams, and one way to do that was to send back Minkah. And Minkah is a guy, very talented player, but the splash plays weren't there as much in the last 2 years. He was hurt in 2023, and then you kind of just look at the price tag and you say, you're paying a safety a lot of money to not make splash plays, to essentially erase the post area of the field, which is very valuable, no doubt about it. What he brought to the table was still very valuable. He's still a very good football player. Over the last 2 years, he's become one of the best tacklers in football. I think they underestimate that in terms of what he was able to do. And I do think the scheme part of not letting Minkah kind of do what Minkah did and does hurt them a little bit. And it wasn't necessarily where they played him, because in 2023, he was a slot corner. He was a kind of the robber. He was all over the place. And then this year he went back to his post safety spot. It was more about where the disguises were and kind of letting Minkah just roam around freely and do some freelancing stuff. And I don't think there was that as much, largely due to personnel, but somewhat due to Minkah's decline as well. Minkah's not the same player he was, I think, in 2022 and before. And so there is something to that. Here's the thing. I don't know, and I said this yesterday, I think the Steelers got better. I think Jalen Ramsey is a really good player. I think he's going to open up a lot of things for them defensively. They finally have a slot corner, I think, that they can really do a lot of fun things with. Jonnu Smith is a good player, albeit, I think, an extremely awkward fit in the offense. And while he is talented, I'm not sure I trust Arthur Smith in this offense of staff to maximize that room. It's a very good room, but not sure I have trust in them to do that. But I said it again, and I think a lot of people were kind of questioning why I think this is. I just don't buy the Steelers as Super Bowl contenders, John. You're making moves to become Super Bowl contenders. I don't care. This is probably my hottest take, John. People talk about the playoff win drought. I truly don't care if they win one playoff game. Like, who cares if they win a wild card game in Houston and then get blown out in Kansas City or get blown out in Buffalo or Baltimore? Like, you want to see them make a run. This has to be more than just about winning a wild card game, get the divisional round. This has to be about winning Super Bowls. Bowls. And so I'm not using this as, can they win a playoff game? Could they win a playoff game? Sure, they could. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But this is about Super Bowls, and I'm just not sure I buy the Steelers roster as that. But this move, I mean, in a vacuum, they got older. They're paying more money than I think any other team in the league to their tight ends right now, which is interesting. It's an interesting allocation of resources, but it's harder to find elite corners than it is elite free safeties. That is true as well. It's harder to replace really good corners. And so the Steelers found a rare piece in Jalen Ramsey. There is no doubt about that. They also traded a rare chip, I think, in the kind of caliber of free safety they have in Minkah, but you can get good free safeties and strong safeties for cheap. That is one thing about the safety market that's true. So they got two positions that are probably more valuable than the safety position. So there's a lot to kind of take into account here. I think in a vacuum, it's a fine trade for the Steelers. I just don't know if I still buy them as Super Bowl contenders. In the AFC, if they were in the NFC, go gung-ho. But you got to go through Allen, Lamar. You got to go through Stroud. You got to go through Mahomes. You got to go through Burrow. You got to go through a lot of players, a lot of really good teams with a lot of good quarterbacks and really explosive offenses in the NFL. So we'll kind of see how this works out. But I do think the Steelers' offseason as a whole, when you put it in the context of it, it still leaves me scratching my head a little bit. Not the move itself, but everything put into context together.
Yes, and you mentioned the safety position. We're going to go to one of our reader questions. Will they have to shore up their safety room in light of this move, and how do they do that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because Jalen can play a little bit of safety. Probably he's got that kind of body type. He's 6'1", he's 210 probably. He's a big corner. I thought this was interesting, John. I'm not sure if you read this. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN today said that the Steelers see shades of Rod Woodson in Jalen Ramsey. And Ramsey's a gold jacket player. There's no doubt about it. He's a future Hall of Famer and will be enshrined in Canton someday. But Rod Woodson, as good as he was for his first 12 years at corner, what made him so great was his longevity because he switched to safety later in his career. It wasn't in Pittsburgh. He was in Baltimore and later Oakland. But that was something that I think sticks out about Ramsey. He doesn't get hurt. He is the type of guy that can play slot. He can play outside. He can play a little safety. He's played all three spots. You can play him all over the map. And he can open up so much for you when you're disguising coverages, blitzes from the slot because he's physical, huge force multiplier in their run game. They have not had a run defender from the slot like this since Mike Hilton. And then they didn't have a coverage player like this in a long time. This is a rare slot player that the Steelers have right now. And, John, the Steelers are looking around the league and looking at some great teams and looking at the elite slot play they're getting. You think about Trent McDuffie in Kansas City, Brian Branch in Detroit, and they look at Jalen Ramsey and think he can be that guy. They think he can be that type of player. And so he's just a different type of player they haven't had on this defense. And so while Minkah was very versatile in what he did, Ramsey is arguably more versatile and a better coverage defender. So he's going to do a lot of different things for them. So he'll factor into that safety room a little bit, particularly in sub packages when they need those three safe, the three safety nickel. I mean, he's probably going to be one of those three safeties, but essentially a slot dimebacker type player. He will be your slot corner. He can be your tight end eraser. So Jalen Ramsey factors into that. I do think they need another safety here. Juan Thornhill had a rough go of things in 2024. He was hurt a lot, which didn't help. Calf injuries have really bugged him the past 2 years in Cleveland. He was an elite free safety in Kansas City before he went to Cleveland. There is something there. He's a ball-aware player, but I do think the tackling is rough. The instincts last year were rough. Some of the angles he took just in run support were maddening. The tape was not good last year for Juan Thornhill. And so we'll kind of see how that works out. I would look at someone like Julian Blackmon, someone like Justin Simmons is going to be thrown out there. Maybe, but Blackmon makes a lot of sense to me because he's a free safety. I think you need another free safety type. And so, you have Deshaun Elliott to be the box guy, and you have a lot of different ways you can kind of mix and match your looks. But Ramsey factors into this. I still think they need another deep safety, just because Thornhill's been injured a lot in recent years. Deshaun Elliott in his career, although he was healthy last year, has not exactly been healthy throughout his career in a lot of these ways. So I would like another safety on this roster to kind of see where that goes. But Jalen Ramsey, as we are discussing, John, is just this chess piece mismatch that the Steelers have just not had defensively. I mean, it's been a long time. I think early portion of his tenure, Minkah did a lot of things. Here's what I would kind of say with Jalen Ramsey. Remember how you used Patrick Peterson, but he just wasn't as athletic. He wasn't as kind of ready to do all those things anymore because he was 34, 35. He had lost a lot of the athleticism. Jalen Ramsey's 30, going to be 31, and the speed's still there. The tape's really good. Is he peak Jacksonville Jalen Ramsey? I don't think so, but he's a really good player still, and he can do so many different things, and that's going to lend itself to more man coverage. It's going to lend itself to more disguising in the back half of their defense. I would bet about 80% of their snaps, Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, and Joey Porter Jr. are all going to be on the football field. I think that's very likely to happen. And I'm interested to see in base what they do. Because theoretically, John, you could play Jalen outside. You could play Jalen Ramsey outside a corner. That's particularly fine. You could also play him at safety. So you could do a lot of different things depending on matchups. So he's just a game-changing kind of chess piece out of the nickel. And some of these guys, these nickel corners that we talk about, the Brian Branches, the Trent McDuffies, they even come in safeties. Think of Kyle Hamilton. Think of Marlon Humphrey, just different players that do different things. And so there's a lot of ways you can use Jalen Ramsey, but he is a chess piece that can erase a lot for them. I do like that part of the deal. I think he is someone that can unlock their defensive scheme a lot compared to what they did last year, where they were just so vanilla and teams read them like a book pre-snap.
Well, you answered another reader question about the increase in man coverage. You say that is coming. But as we say goodbye to Minkah, you do definitely have a divided Steelers nation. I mean, there are a lot of Minkah supporters out there who think he's getting the raw end of a deal, despite, like you said, the lack of splash plays commensurate with his salary. But Paul Zeiss in the Post-Gazette, the columnist, was very unsentimental in bidding Minkah farewell. He said this: "I will miss the one or two games Minkah Fitzpatrick would actually play like an elite corner and make a play or two, and all of his fanboys talking on social media to tell us mere mortals who thought he was a tad overrated. You see, he's still a stud." But was he overrated? And was there anything at minicamp that portended like that maybe he was on his way out? I know when I saw him in the locker room when I was out there with you on one of those days, he's pretty quiet. He didn't have a lot of reporters around, wasn't talking very much. Very quiet guy. I mean, was there any? I know you said it was a surprise, but was there any indication of like the skill? If you had to describe the skill level decline for Minkah, how would you put it?
I just think, when you think back to Minkah's peak powers, he was such a next level ball hawking threat. There was no one like him in the league, right? And some of that was luck, sure, but a lot of it was just making reads at the right time. And so he kind of became this stationary player in the post, John. And that was something that I think with Minkah, he ran into an issue with, is while he was erasing part of the field, he wasn't making a tangible impact outside of that. And that hidden impact matters a lot, but it also doesn't matter so much to where you say, is this worth $20 million per year? Like, that's a big thing. You got to look at allocation of resources. Safety's not a premium position. And I look at Jesse Bates in Atlanta, formerly Cincinnati, as an elite free safety. And we talk about the way that elite free safeties erase. I remember seeing Minkah do that. And then I watched Jesse Bates games last year. I mean, this guy had 4 picks last year. He had 3 the year before in Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta's making a coup out of that deal. He's had a ton of picks. He had 6 picks. Those are forced fumbles. So this guy had 6 picks in his first year, 3 forced fumbles, 4 picks in his second year, 4 forced fumbles. I mean, he has almost 20 splash plays with the Falcons. And so elite free safeties make plays like that. And Mink is a really good safety. But to be elite status like that, to be being paid that much, you got to be making a lot of impact. And Minkah was doing that. And so the lack of splash play, you could see him late in the year, John, pushing for it. Like, it was like he was trying to freelance and do things. He obviously wasn't the reason for the miscommunication blows late in last year, even though some people will say it was. It was obviously Cam Sutton. Let's keep it a buck. Minkah did try to kind of push things and tried to freelance a little bit, but Steelers kind of gave him that grace anyways. He was allowed to do it as he seed. And so I always thought Minkah's issue was not having kind of this overall impact that he once had. He was a very good player, and he's going to be very good for Miami. Miami has a terrible corner room, and Minkah saved a lot of the Steelers' corners like Dante Jackson and Patrick Pearson, Levi Walsh from looking a lot worse than they did on the All-22 because he would just cover ground. But the splash plays had to come at some point, and they didn't. And that was the fact of the matter. I don't think he was a malcontent here. I don't think he was anything bad in the locker room. I think he was a great leader. I think the Steelers love the player and the person he is. It's just when you are commanding as much money as he is, there's a different standard you're held to. If he had a $10 million cap hit, they wouldn't have even thought about moving. Like, that's the thing. The Dolphins very easily, John, could be cutting Minkah after this year. Like, very possible. And if Minkah did not have another year where he had a lack of splash plays, if he had another year where he had a lack of splash plays this year, there was a very good chance, John, that he would have been cut next year in the offseason. So, I mean, I just don't – I think people look at a 28-year-old safety who's still good and say, well, you traded him for a 30-year-old safety who's going to be 31 and you're getting older. But there is a decline in Minkah's play, even though he went from elite to very good. And so when you're making that much money at safety, why not allocate that same resource? The Steelers allocate a little bit more resources to the corner position, which is just a more important position. And kind of what they're going to be able to do with Jalen Ramsey is going to be a lot more than what they were going to be able to do with Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think that's just a big fact of the matter.
Great analysis there. And, an unsentimental look at, like you put it, a good but not great Minkah Fitzpatrick. A still good but not great Minkah Fitzpatrick. Let's move on to Jonnu Smith, who you are a little confounded by. I'm kind of intrigued by. Some people are dreaming of Freiermuth and Smith in the Arthur Smith offense, and we know he has a history with Jonnu Smith. He projects as both a tight end and an H-back. And, it kind of, does it – I'm going to ask you, but in my mind, it seems certainly to put, Connor Hayward on the bubble, who kind of slipped a little, regressed a little last season. And I know from just spending a little time with him talking about Cam for an upcoming profile we're working on, that he really was investing a lot into this season. It's his 4th as a Steeler. I think it's the end of his rookie deal. He really wanted to right the ship, and Connor was really putting a lot into his prep for this season, sort of modeling on sort of the Cam model for getting ready, for the grind. But this kind of, what does this do for that whole tight end room, but also how are these guys going to be utilized on offense under Arthur Smith?
It's fascinating. I mean, let's start off with the strengths of Jonnu. He is a weapon that they didn't have, but he also doesn't really fill the hole at wide receiver 2. He's an interesting weapon. He's kind of like an additional weapon, right? He's kind of a guy you carved out and said, okay, we're going to try and fit this new piece in, and I would still like to see them get another wide receiver. And so Smith is a really fun player in terms of what he can do after the catch. Explosive. Again, an older player, but very athletic and explosive. Here's a few things that I think he fits in extremely well at. He's going to be out in the slot, and he's able to run routes, and he's able to turn plays that would be mundane 5 to 10 yard plays into big gainers. He's one of the best yak tight ends in the NFL, if not the best yak tight end in the NFL. The Steelers did not really have a yak threat last year, to be quite honest with you, John. That was a big thing. They couldn't throw a ball 5 yards and expect to get 15. They would have gotten 7 at most, right? You're just not seeing guys break tackles and make big plays off catches. Okay, Jonnu brings that. So he's going to help the screen game. That'll be a big boost for the Steelers. He's also going to help when you split out the shotgun and empty, because the Steelers are going to do that enough this year. Jonnu Smith can do that. He can really be a threat there. That's actually where Miami used a lot of. They kind of spread the defense out, played a lot of this gun look stuff, and they kind of just let Jonnu Smith go crazy in open field and open grass. And that's kind of how he's used, I think. You're not really going to see him a lot in line. He's not a good blocker. And so he's a fun kind of wrinkle to this offense. Here's where I have issues with it. It's an odd fit because Freiermuth doesn't really block that well either. And what makes 12 and 13 personnel so dangerous, John, is the threat of the run and the pass. Why is the Ravens 12 personnel so dangerous? Well, Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews both can block their butts off. That's one thing that really allows them to kind of crack the code. And so when Likely is a receiver and a really good inline blocker, you can do so many different things. Play action, under center. You can be a threat to run the ball on any down. When you can't block on the edges and on the end man of the line of scrimmage with your tight ends and 12 personnel, you get nothing out of the run game, and teams play the pass because they know they're going to be able to trust their edge rushers to crush your tight ends. And so the Steelers, in my opinion, kind of looking at where things stand, are really going to struggle to run the ball with a Freiermuth Smith 12 personnel grouping, which actually means, in my opinion, this eats more into both their snap counts, because I think Darnell Washington has to be out there with them. Now, maybe Washington takes that leap as a receiver, and we aren't talking about anything of that. And cool, you have 3 great receivers. 13 personnel is going to be pretty fun, I think, because you're going to be able to have Washington out there, and you can do different things with Jonnu. You can split them out and everything. But 12 personnel with those two, it's a little complicated unless you're spread out, right? They become big receivers. And so I always, and kind of how I view tight ends that are big receivers nowadays, is I'd rather just have the big slot receiver. The Steelers don't have the slot receiver, though. And so Jonnu and Pat Freiermuth are going to kind of be the conduit to that in some respect. Now, I would still like to see them add somebody like Gabe Davis, even though I'm not like super high on Gabe Davis or Amari Cooper or those guys, but I'd still like to see them add somebody. Best case scenario, you get a Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks type. That would be good. So I would like to see them add another kind of receiver, but there's just kind of odd fits with the Steelers tight end room, because if Freiermuth could block at a high level, I think this would make a lot of sense. The fact that he's just at best an average blocker, he's probably a slightly below average blocker, I think really questions just how many mismatches you create with both of them on the field. And so it feels a little odd. They're going to play a lot of 13 personnel with DK Metcalf being the only wide receiver on the field probably. They're going to do a lot of different things. They played the 6th most 13th personnel last year in the league, up near 15%. I think that's going to go up to at least 20, which put them in first place. So they're going to try and do a lot of different things. I'm just not sure how much it's going to work considering their blocking illnesses. And I think that hurts what you can do. So we'll kind of see. It adds talent, but I also think the Steelers have to be very careful how much they use these guys frequently, the frequency-wise, how they formationally use them, and how they kind of go about getting mismatches with them. There's definitely ways to do it. It's just not easy. And, John, I don't know if you watched this tape last year from the Steelers' offense, but I'm not sure Arthur Smith inspired a lot of quality for me to think he will be the guy to do that.
Right. No, I familiar with that and familiar with your analysis of it as well. But I do like your interesting take here, predicting that maybe Smith and Freiermuth kind of eat into each other's playing time while Washington continues his ascent in the tight end pecking order. And certainly we know that Aaron Rodgers took notice of the big guy, comparing him to Mercedes Lewis. So that also could bode well for Washington and his playing time. Let me just ask you real quick, because you didn't address it. Connor Hayward, is he on the bubble? Is he on his way out? What's his status?
He better show up to be a really good blocker. I think that's going to be his biggest thing. If this guy doesn't show up as a blocker this year, he's in trouble, because I think he's going to be someone that's going to play fullback, H-back, and do a little bit of everything. But here's the case. John, he was more of a receiving tight end the first 2 years. Under Arthur Smith, the Steelers are going to keep 2 receiving tight ends and probably 2 blocking tight ends. So DJ Thomas-Jones fits that better. Their UDFA that they gave the largest guaranteed bonus to at a non-quarterback this year, that was him. He fits that well. Connor Hayward's still fighting for his roster spot as a result of that. Now, a lot of that is going to come down to special teams, because Hayward plays really good special teams, and Jonnu Smith and Darnell aren't going to be special teamers, so that 4th spot's going to be as much special teams as much as the utility they bring offensively is, and Connor Hayward has that in his kind of cap. But let's keep it a buck here. He's going to have to be able to block. If not, then I think he's in danger. DJ Thomas-Jones has shown an aptitude to be a blocker, a willing blocker, a violent blocker, and a really willing learner. And so I think Connor Hayward's got a position battle ahead of him here in Latrobe. We'll see who wins that battle between those two.
Interesting. That'll be something we'll be watching in Latrobe, of course. Let me ask you about another guy we got to get to know at mini camp. And just for the listeners out there, we have a great profile on Dante Kent. He's the Steelers' 7th round pick, who happens to be from Harrisburg High School, which is in my neck of the woods here in Harrisburg, and where Penn Live is based. And he had some really interesting comments about just the first step in his career, which was sort of breaking out of Harrisburg and all the distractions and things that can hold you back in an inner city high school, where there are so many other things going on than people looking ahead to their own career. So I would highly urge you to look that one up on Penn Live and give it a read. But, all the shuffling in the secondary with Jalen Ramsey's arrival, what does that do to Dante Kent, who seemed to be coming on pretty strong? And, does this throw his opportunity up in the air?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see kind of how they go about that competition, because now it feels like him and Beanie Bishop are fighting for a spot on the roster. It just does. And the Steelers really do have a deep corner room now. And that's fun to say, because they feel like they haven't had a deep corner room in forever. But they have options in the slot. And having Kent as your slot corner 3 now, compared to the slot corner 2 that was competing to maybe start, feels a lot better. Now, Beanie Bishop, different body type this year. He's a little bigger, trying to get better as a tackler. So the pads need to pop on. For Kent, it's going to come down to how quickly does he take to special teams, because you're not going to make the team without playing special teams. Beanie Bishop can play teams, so we know that. So can he be a good gunner? Can he be a legitimate punt return option for them, kick return option for them? All that adds to his utility and can have him push for a roster spot. He can also just be a really intriguing practice squad player, John. That's more than fine. Some guys do that and end up being an intriguing ad in their second year, right, where they maybe take a leap. He needs some seasoning, but he's a ball hawk. And so he's got the type of mentality it's needed to try and make this roster. And so we'll see. I think it's him versus Beanie Bishop. I certainly would lean more towards Beanie Bishop, but I mean, Omar Khan certainly seemed pretty excited about him when they said he expects him to contribute sooner rather than later. That bodes well. They have expectations for him. So we will see. I think he will either be kind of that slot corner 2 and make the roster, or be a guy that makes the practice squad and could easily earn a call-up at any time if he shows what he can do.
Well, we'll certainly be watching Dante here in Harrisburg, and I know just based on some of the reaction we got on the profile we did, there's a lot of other guys in Harrisburg sort of pulling for Dante Kent to make that roster with the Steelers after training camp. The last thing I wanted to talk about is Omar Khan. You talked about the idea of going all in to win now, but also trying to build for the future, and how the Steelers and Khan have been kind of schizophrenic in doing one or the other, or what are they really doing here. But the other thing in cutting ties with Minkah Fitzpatrick in the way that they did, and like you said, they could have done it with picks, mid-round picks, rather than part with Fitzpatrick, which they did so apparently because of the value proposition, the splash plays versus the salary he was being paid. But for some Steelers fans, they look at it at the old way of Steelers loyalty, and maybe even paying for past performance, that those days are over, that Khan is setting the standard. What have you done for me lately? We're not going to rest on our reputation or our laurels. It's going to be analytics and production, and comparing the stats with the paycheck. So yeah, just how would you sum up the signal being sent by Omar Khan with this move? And is that signal going out to TJ Watt, who is still holding out for the $40 million a year money set by Myles Garrett?
Well, I do think it says something about their urgency to win playoff games. That's something I will say, John. And I think that's what it's saying, is the Steelers are tired of spinning their tires in the same spot. Ironically, they very well might end up there again, just by their kind of roster construction. But I do think that's what it says. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, that sends a message to the locker room saying, hey, if the right offer comes along for somebody and we don't feel like you're performing up to the standards we think your salary suggests, you may be moved and you're not always safe. And I do think that is something the Steelers are sending a message here. But I think it's more about their playoff kind of success rate, which has been awful in the recent years. They haven't won a playoff game since 2017. It's been 8 years. That's a long time for this franchise. They've lost 6 straight playoff games, John. They've been to the playoffs a lot. They haven't won one in so long. And they lost to the Browns at home. And they've gone on the road and just gotten shellacked by the Chiefs and the Bills and the Ravens. And I think last year was the straw that broke the camel's back in that respect. When you go into Baltimore, your division rivals team, right? I think that is probably an understated point people don't mention enough. They went into their main rival's building and got their behinds kicked. Not once, but twice. That is a statement from the team that you are competing most against. The Ravens are the measuring stick. The Steelers can talk as much as they want about the Bills and the Chiefs, and obviously you want to compete with those teams, but the measuring stick is always going to be Baltimore. If you beat Baltimore, even though you have lost in years you've beaten Baltimore, you feel like you at least have a shot. Baltimore ran them out of the building in that game. They ran for almost 300 yards. If they hadn't had the kneel downs, there would have been over 300 yards rushing in a playoff game. Do you know how hard it is in 2025 to lose a game strictly off the rushing defense? Do you know how hard that is? The Steelers did it. They set a new precedent there. And so Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, Art Rooney, all of them are saying, we're tired of this, and we're placing the blame on personnel. And so we're restocking the shelves. Look at what they did this year. All 3 quarterbacks, John, gone. Their supposed next leader at running back, Najee Harris, gone. George Pickens, gone. They let go of some of their other offensive linemen. Dan Moore, James Daniels, gone. They cut Larry Ogunjobi and completely re-wiped the defensive line in some respects. They draft Derek Harmon, Y.A. Black, Jack Sawyer. Okay, the trenches are our focus. They did so much to change this team. Minkah Fitzpatrick is the latest. They shipped out so many players that it is saying no one's safe and we aren't complacent anymore. But here's the thing, John. The personnel changes are great and all, but you actually need to see the changes on the field manifest, right? And if something doesn't change sooner rather than later, not after this year, but, Mike Tomlin's contract runs through 2027. If something doesn't change by then, at some point, Art Rooney needs to look at himself and say, is Mike T the guy for the job? So let's see if he is. This is a great launching pad for Mike T to showcase, hey, I can still get this team to where they need to go. They have more talent than they've had in a long time. It's the most talented team, I think, since 2020 that they have right now. And so go win a playoff game. Go show that you can be, successful here, and then get the quarterback next year and use this as a launch pad back to contendership. But this year's a big year, I think, for Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan to showcase they're the right guys in charge.
Interesting. And certainly those Raven blowouts late in the season were seismic, especially because of the history of that rivalry was a 3-point give or take grudge match. It could go either way. I mean, it's been that way for 20 years, but to go and get blown out like that was just jaw-dropping, to say the least. One thing I got to, in a very few words, and then we'll close it out, just give me your take on what T.J. Watt thought, what went through his mind when he saw the Minkah Fitzpatrick heading out of town down to Miami.
Bring me my money. I think that's what he said. I don't think he cares. I mean, not that he doesn't care. He's probably saying, "Wow." He's probably surprised, just like Cam Hayward was about about Minkah getting shipped out. But let's keep it a buck here. TJ is putting on the pressure to get his contract. From my understanding, John, and you probably saw the tweet I sent out yesterday where I texted a member of the organization and the response was F no to trading him. He's not going anywhere. From my understanding, the Steelers' offer is in Myles Garrett territory, and this is more about guaranteed money. So Let's see how long that takes to hash out. It took them 3 months to hash out Cam Hayward and Pat Freiermuth's guaranteed money last year. I think they want this done before training camp, so sometimes in the next 3 weeks they'd hope that he signs. So we'll see who kowtows on it. But I do think I'm thinking likelier and likelier that TJ Watt is about to become the highest non-paid quarterback in the NFL. I think he's going to do it. So I think the Steelers are willing to do it, but I don't think they want to. They might give him that, but say, okay, then you got to give us. We're not going to bring guaranteed money into year 3 of this contract, which is something that he's probably going to want, given he would be 34 in that year. So we'll see. I think it gets done. I don't think there's any chance it gets traded. So it'll be done before the season. The question is going to be, does it get done before training camp?
Great prediction and great analysis about that year 3 of the guaranteed money, because if anything, the Minkah Fitzpatrick situation does show that if you don't live up to your paycheck, you can be traded. So that year 3 would be interesting to see how much guaranteed money carries over there. So that'll be interesting to watch. And we'll be watching it all. We'll be talking to Nick about everything every Tuesday live on YouTube. So be there. And until then, go Steelers. Did we lose Megan?